Hello there, welcome back to Jennie Designs with Paper. Thank you so much for coming over to hang out with me today. I have a really cool card video for you, so get comfy and let's get crafty. For my video today, I am using the Altenew Swamp Buttercup stencil and die set. So this does not have a stamp set that coordinates, but it does have a set of 5 layering stencils. So the first thing I did was pull out the insert to see which of the colors that they recommended in the informational pamphlet that comes with the stencil set. And I had most of the colors. I did not have the 3 kind of greenish brown colors that take care of the very centers of the flower. So I pulled out some browns. I also have new in my craft room the sticky mat for the Misty stamp positioner. So I have seen Kathy Zilski and a few other people using their Misty as a stenciling guide, like so that your stencil stays in place. I didn't do it right. Yeah, we'll get into that. All of the stencils here are labeled, and I don't know if you can see that very well. They are etched and labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up in the top left-hand corner. And the first thing I'm going to do is put the number 1 stencil down on my sticky mat so that I can take this piece of cardstock. This is Neenah's Solar White Classic Crest 80-pound cardstock. And it is trimmed down to be 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches. And by all appearances, it seems like it will cover it. That size cardstock will absorb all of the image. So what I've noticed by putting my stencil down in the bottom left-hand corner is that in order to get all of those openings onto this piece of paper, I need to have this piece of paper, this little quarter piece of cardstock, 2 lines up from the bottom and 2 lines in from the right. So that's kind of what I was measuring there. And that theoretically, and I use that word because it's very real in this instance, that theoretically will allow me to just take each stencil off and plop it in the corner. Yeah. So the first stencil is the stencil with the greatest amount of open space. So this is the lightest color. And the lightest color I'm using today is Altenew's Buttercream ink. I have the little ink cubes. And my ink cubes I've had for quite some time, and they are getting dry. And I haven't decided yet what to do about that. Do I want to replace my ink cubes with full-size ink pads or just buy the re-inkers? And I'm leaning toward the re-inkers because the ink cubes are easier to store than full-size ink pads in my craft room. So one thing to note as I speed through the ink blending here is that I am moving in circles, both counterclockwise and clockwise, to make sure that the ink is going through that stencil evenly. And I'm just using my Cricut tool here, my Cricut spatula, to peel that stencil off the sticky mat. And I'm going to go ahead and put stencil number 2 down. And it works for stencil number 2, except that my sticky mat won't stay in place. So I did go ahead and put my bar magnet on there. And I got that all lined up. And I'm going to be using the Warm Sunshine ink color. And I'm using my same yellow ink blending brush. So I'm just going to scribble the color, wipe the color on a piece of scrap cardstock there to the right. Now, it's probably not super necessary because I'm using yellows still, and this is a darker yellow, but because I felt like maybe it would be a little bit wet, yeah, whatever. I did need to reposition that just a tad, you noticed. And again, I'm ink blending in circles going both counterclockwise and clockwise. And that's just because if you only go one direction, there's going to be a halo where the brush doesn't hit that side of the stencil. So you want to make sure that you're going in both directions. Okay, we have stencil number 2 complete. And stencil number 3 is where I realized a couple of things. Yeah, I sorry, I'm watching the video going, how did I not notice this before? Since stencil number 3 has both the dark the lowlights of the flowers, but it also has the inserts of the flowers. There's actually a line embossed or engraved on this stencil, and I was like, I didn't even notice it. Like, look right there at the top, you can see there's a full-on flower that is not even, yeah. I see, I'm telling you, oh, look, I messed up. So I did have to pull this stencil up and realign my paper. I'm not sure how I missed that before. I really do not even understand how I missed that before. But here I get to show you another technique. The best way to get your cardstock off these sticky mats is to kind of bend the sticky mat backwards, and then your paper doesn't curl, except my sticky mat came out of my hand, and so my paper curled. But, you know, that's why I do these videos, so you all cannot do the things I'm doing. Okay, in order to figure out where this needs to be, I am just lining the paper up behind the stencil so that the openings match and everything is all lined up appropriately, how it is supposed to be. And then I'm just going to put this down together at one time onto my sticky mat. So in some ways, this sticky mat really was a lifesaver today. So I am pulling out the third color, which is Caramel Toffee, and I decided to pull out my orange blending brush because it is quite a dark yellow, light orange. And again, just blending in circles and making sure I get that low light on all of the flowers. So the next step then is to take stencil number 3 and align those openings. This is the first which I totally just skipped doing. And then I went, oh yeah, no, come back. I have to do the middles of the flowers. I was so excited about this stamp, this image, this buttercup image. Yeah, I just was losing my mind. So I lined them up the same way as I did before. I peeled everything up off of the sticky mat and kind of looked through it. And I have 3 colors of brown because I don't have the brownish greens that were indicated in the color combination chart. And I'm using sand dunes on this for the insert. And it's just a light brown. They used Misty Moore for that color. I use sand dune. So, you know, it's not quite as green, but it works. It's more of a brown than a green brown. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and move on to stencil number 4, which is the greenery. And here is where I realized I made another mistake. I should have started with a piece of 6x6 paper, because even though the cutout image will fit on the front of an A2 size card, I didn't orient my paper properly to fit that. And so I'm going to have leaves that hang off that don't get any. They're just not going to exist. So one thing with this stencil set that I would recommend is starting with like a bigger piece of cardstock, not a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch piece of cardstock. So we're just going to move on. We're going to pull out the green blending brush and the first green ink, which is Forest Glades. And we're going to ink up the light layer of the leaves, the stems and the leaves. And it works, y'all. It works. No complaints. I still love the stencil set. But, you know, I feel like this is the first time. This is the first time I use this stencil set, the first time I use the die set. And I'm doing it like on camera for you guys so you can see maybe what things to do better, right? One thing to note with this stencil set, or this stencil number 4, is that it does have more inserts for the flowers. So this time I used Rocky Shore as opposed to Marshland, and did the mid-tone of the insert, or the insides of the flowers, the stamen and all that stuff, the middle parts of the flowers. All right, one more stencil, stencil number 5. This is the darker of the stems and also the darker parts of the inserts to the middles of the flowers. And I'm just lining that up. The cool thing about these stencils, the stencils for the leaves and the stems, is that there are etched lines with the outline of the flowers. So they really are easy to line up. I guess I'm making it more difficult here, or I'm making it appear more difficult than it really is. But there are etched lines that are the outlines of the flower, so it really is easy to get the stems lined up properly. The darker color green is evergreen, so I will be outlining, oh my heaven's sakes, ink blending the low light of the leaves with evergreen ink. And the color that I used for the low light of the middles of the flowers is mocha as opposed to sea forest. So, it works. I was surprised at how many of the colors that they recommended or that they used in their insert that I actually had in my drawer, because I haven't bought new Altenew inks in quite some time. All right, so we have our image completely ink blended, and I'm going to try this trick again by bending the sticky mat in half and pulling the paper off, and it's still curled a little bit, but I've got to send it through my die cut machine to trim it out with the coordinating die, so it's all good. So here I have my die, and I am going to line it up, and I'm going to stick it down with some low tack tape to make sure that it doesn't move while I am die cutting it. Now the tape I am using is just some blue painter's tape, and I'm going to rip a piece off, and then I'm going to stick it down onto my shirt sleeve to pick up some fuzz and get a little bit more de-sticky, to get a little less sticky. Oh my heaven's sakes. Now I'm making up words. It's not just that words are hard, y'all. Now I have to make up words. So I'm going to take this blue painter's tape and tape down the stencil. When I use tape, especially painter's tape, to tape my dies over my stenciled or stamped image, I make sure that the majority of the tape is on the outside of the stencil. I don't want to put that tape down very strongly on the inked image, because sometimes even the most delicate tape can tear. And I just went through all of that to ink blend this image. I don't want it to tear while I'm picking the die up off of my paper. So I'm going to send this through my Spellbinders die cut machine, and I have it all cut out. So we're going to go ahead and put the card together real quick. I do have a piece of dark green cardstock from my stash, and it is cut to 4 1/4 inches by 11. So we will score that in half at 5.5 inches to create a US A2 size card. This will be a top fold portrait style card. And I feel like this dark green cardstock really coordinates nicely with the greens in the leaves on my die cut image that just flew clear across my desk and landed on the floor because, why not? I am going to crease that bone folder, or crease the edge with a bone folder. And I do need to line it up with the parts of those leaves that were cut off because, I messed up. But I feel like it needs something. So I went through my embossing folders, and I have this old Provo Craft Cuttlebug folder. It's called Swiss Dots. And so I'm going to select a coordinating color of cardstock. This is a lighter green. And I'm going to align this little panel of cardstock. Well, first I'm going to trim it down. I find it easier to trim it before you put it through the embossing folder. And I'm cutting it to 4 by 5 1/4. But really, it wasn't. It was already cut down to like 5 inches tall. And in my brain, that was right. Yeah, it was right. So this is what happens when I spend too much time out of my craft room. I forget things that I've known for years and years and years. But anyway, so we have this really nice piece of light green cardstock that has been sent through the die cut machine with my embossing folder. And I'm going to layer the flower on the Buttercup swag flower piece thingy onto the front of our embossed card panel. Y'all, it's extra today. It is Wednesday, and it is extra Wednesday today. I did not craft much this weekend. As I mentioned in my little video I posted on Monday, we celebrated my husband's 50th birthday this weekend, and we celebrated by one of my daughters coming down with COVID. She doesn't live at home, but she lives by herself, and she came down with COVID, so I had to do a grocery drop at her house to make sure that she had all the meds she needed to not be miserable. And gosh, I just wanted to stay there. It was breaking my mama's heart, but yeah, she's okay. She's okay though. She's feeling better. She's on the mend. Okay, I have the Swamp Buttercup image adhered to my card panel that has the little dots that I threw with the embossing folder. And I have trimmed off one of those little flowers that's hanging off the left side just to make it look like the leaves hanging off the right were trimmed down on purpose. And I'm kind of trying to show you these cute little dots that are formed by this embossing folder. Anyways, it's time to put our card together. So I need to pull out my double-sided adhesive and tape that card panel to the front of the card. Now, normally when I have an embossed panel, I will use a liquid glue, but the embossing on this is so small that a double-sided tape runner will work just fine. So I'm using my ATG, and I'm putting tape along all four sides and down the middle because it is an embossed image, so it does have some texture on the back. And I'm using my normal trick of turning it sideways so I can see three sides and give it about the same border, and wowzers. So here is me fast forwarding through trying to figure out why that didn't line up properly. And then I realized that 5 inches is not the proper length. And at no point in time did it occur to me to just line it up properly and trim the bottom edge off to create the same size margin. No, it did not. Anyways, we're going to put a piece of white copy paper on the inside of this card so there's a place to write a message, and I need a sentiment. So I have pulled out this Altenew Label Love stamp set, and I'm going to use the stamp that says just for you, because then this card can be a whatever I need it for card. And I like this sentiment set because they stamp like labels, like those old school labels. So I'm going to put this into my MISTI with some scrap cardstock. It's just a piece of white cardstock that was sitting on my desk. And I'm going to ink this up with VersaFine Nocturne Black ink. It's the VersaFine Clair ink. And I love this for sentiments. I am probably going to have to stamp this twice because it is a super solid image. Even the Nocturne, even the VersaClair ink, I'm going to have to stamp it twice. And I'm trying to not put too much pressure down as I try to get a nice clean stamp. And I did a pretty good job. I did need to stamp it. And probably I didn't need to stamp it twice, right? It looks just fine. But I wanted to stamp it again because I thought I could get better than just fine. So I did ink up that stamp and stamped it again. And still not using much pressure, just using my shirt sleeve so that I can slide my hand right across the lid of my MISTI. But that second stamping left a couple of the letters a little iffy. So after I trimmed it out and went around the edges with a black Sharpie, just to kind of hide that white core cardstock, I did then decide that I needed to kind of fix those letters that look a little bit less clear. So I pulled out a white Jelly Roll pen, and this is the pen I have in my drawer is a number 10, I think. And once I got it moving, because for some reason where I live in Virginia, my gel pens, they need a little bit of encouragement. I store them laying flat because I found that is the best way for pens in my area. If I store them tipped down, all of that ink gets on the ball roller and then it just clogs up. So I store them horizontally, and then I just draw on my finger a little bit and it gets the ball rolling in that pen, and it works really well. So I'm just going over all of the letters in the sentiment because I did feel like maybe that second stamping, maybe I pushed a little bit too hard and some of the lines weren't as clear as they were the first time. So it's a trade, right? Do I want the letters nice and clear? Or do I want the background nice and dark? I do need to figure out where I want to put it. I've decided I'm going to align it over on the right-hand side. And at first I was going to use my liquid glue, but then I decided to go for some foam tape and pop that puppy up. So I have this roll of 3M foam tape. I've just cut myself off a little tiny piece. I will cut that in half skinny wise to make it more narrow. And then I'm going to go ahead and put the adhesive on the back of my sentiment strip and peel off the backing paper and use my tweezers to align that sentiment so I can make sure that it is at least visually straight, because you know, I don't use rulers, I just use my eyeballs. And that is my card. So super cool stencil set. I love these layering stencils. Definitely would use a larger piece of paper and maybe not use my MISTI next time. Just do it old school. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I have a couple other videos that I hope you will also watch. I think you'll enjoy them. I've also added a subscribe button. If you have not yet subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you did. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you like about this card or what you don't like. And have a great day.